Hi, everyone. Aaron Henney, Artistic Director of Theater Dybbuk here, and welcome to our noon chat. You know, we've been doing a series of these over the weeks of chats with me, as well as trainings with collaborating artists from Theater Dybbuk, and it's a real pleasure to be with you. I know some folks may be just joining us, so for those who haven't been with us before, I'll say a little bit about who I am and who Theater Dybbuk is, and then we'll dive in. So again, welcome to those just joining us. And this is, first of all, really Theater Dybbuk's attempt to stay connected with our community during this time where we're isolated. And Theater Dybbuk, for those who don't know, creates large theatrical works based on Jewish history and ritual over about 1 to 2 years per project that speak to contemporary concerns. And this week's topic we're going to be diving into is about productive discomfort in theatrical performance, the value of discomfort. Before I really get into the details, let me just first say our marketing director, who's also my spouse, Julie Lockhart, is here with me, and she will be keeping an eye on comments or questions so that I can address any that may come up. Julie, say hi.
Hi there.
Great. And we'll probably go for 15, 20-ish minutes during this conversation, and feel free to send us questions as they arise. So this week's topic, as I said, is productive discomfort, this idea of challenging the audience with discomfort. And first, I just want to acknowledge that in this moment, that may seem a little almost countercultural, right? We are in a moment where many of us are seeking comfort because of how uncomfortable the situation is. And yet there's people saying that, you know, many have talked about how this could also be a moment that this discomfort could lead to greater understanding and changes in our society. So I think that I just wanted to plant that seed as we have this conversation about theatrical performance. So first, let me begin by saying, you know, that often when people engage with theatrical work, the questions they ask, and I'm guilty of this, they ask themselves and they ask others, is, did you enjoy it? Did you like it? Was it entertaining? And not that those questions don't have value, but they are not the only questions. They may not even be the primary questions for a given theatrical work. There may be questions like, were you provoked? Were you upset? What did it leave you thinking about? Were you angry? Right? All of these questions are not of greater or lesser value than did you like it or did you enjoy, but are of, I would say, equal value. So one is to, I'm looking to retrain ourselves as well as to encourage audience members to ask other questions, because the purpose of the art may not be about enjoyment, it may be about something else. So I'm going to actually talk about one particular Theater Dybbuk work as a way of discussing productive discomfort. And for those who are artists or audience members who are watching this, or some combination of the two, although I'll be speaking about a specific work, I will encourage you to think about the ways in which the principles that are underlying what I'm talking about may apply to your own engagement in art in whatever way that means for you. So Theater Dybbuk in 2019 did a work called Hell Prepared. And it essentially was a kind of ritual exorcism that used a Jewish descent into a hellish space to look at questions of assimilation and identity and power in our contemporary society. And it took place in a setting that was the 17th century in Italy, where Jews lived in a ghetto. This one was in Venice, which is, of course, probably the most famous Jewish ghetto in Italy. And as a result, the piece was looking at questions of what is it to be a marginalized community within a dominant society? And then it was also looking at questions of marginalization within marginalization. This idea that women in this particular society may not have had the same power as men, or did not have the same power as men. And so we were also looking at questions of what is it to have oppression even within an oppressed group. And our feeling was, in order to ask these hard questions, an audience can't be fully comfortable, because if they're fully comfortable and they're just enjoying, they may not be able to actually have the visceral experience of what it is to live in a society like that, and to process their own involvement in those ways in our own society's questions and difficulties around privilege. Any questions or comments coming in?
No.
Okay, great. So first, I'll begin by talking about so for those, I did a similar talk this week on Jewish Live, where I actually really talked about the content of the show mostly. This talk, in case you are joining us from there, is really focused on the theatrical structures we used to encourage productive discomfort. So first, when one was entering the production space, there was a gate. One came to a gate and could not enter the space until passing through the gate. And at the gate were young men who were wearing armbands and would ask you for your papers when you showed up. And right away, we put audience members in a state of dis-ease, right? A lot of people laughed it off and thought it was, cute and funny and light because they knew obviously this is a theater piece, but it still causes a moment if somebody is confronting me and saying, where are my papers? And if I don't have papers, can I get in? And that immediate, just the first thing you encounter is a boundary, I think causes audience members to not be on their steadiest feet, so to speak, on the most solid ground. And therefore, to maybe in a small way start asking questions of privilege in our own society, of who's allowed in what spaces and why, what economics are at play in those questions. So, okay, so right away we did that. Because you know what, this is what happens anytime you go to a box office, right? Whether or not you have the money and have the ticket determines whether you can enter. And maybe we should start slowing down and asking questions of those boundaries and how they apply. So then the next thing we did was we stripped audience members of their current identity. So let me step back and tell you a little something about 17th century Venetian Jewish ghetto. There were groups of men called confraternities, and they would gather in the middle of the night or early in the morning to do Jewish rituals. And of course, they were only men, women were not allowed. And we thought, well, let's put the audience members in a state of being part of those confraternities. So when audience members were entering one of the performance spaces, because there were two performance spaces, when they entered the first one, we told them they were now male. We gave them a male Hebrew name, and we gave them a yarmulke or kippah that they had to wear, a head covering, in order to engage in the show. Now, again, like at the gate, some people thought this was cute or funny, and others actually were uncomfortable. One, because we're saying whatever your gender identity is, irrelevant, you are now male identified. And two, we were saying whatever your religious identity is, in order to participate in this, you need to take on a different religious identity. That's what that marker was telling you, that head covering. And again, people had to then start to ask questions of privilege. Who gets entrance where? In what places in my life am I putting up boundaries to engagement and to inclusion? And what places in my life am I participating in privilege? And then the religious question too of, we live in a world that has dominant cultures and dominant religious voices. And sometimes we don't even question that we may be putting on the garb of that dominance. And so to actually call out that we're asking you to put on a different garb, I think caused some productive discomfort and allowed those questions to be asked. I'm just going to pause for a second to see if there are any questions about anything I'm addressing. Yeah. Great. Okay. But feel free. I've got a plan, but I'm happy to deviate from the plan if you do have questions. All right. So the next point of discomfort was in the first performance space itself. We were in a fairly intimate library. It's actually a wonderful library at this venue called the Philosophical Research Society that has books from the 15, 16, 1700s about mysticism and spirituality. But it's quite intimate. It's relatively small. So audience members, and it's ironic to talk about this at this moment, but needed to be in very close proximity to one another, not quite enough space to be comfortable. They had to maybe figure out how to stand in order to see the main action in the space. And what does this discomfort do? One is it reminds you of your responsibility when being with others. How much am I just taking care of myself, and how much am I aware of the people around me? And, oh, what does it mean that I may have gotten to the front and get to engage in a more free way while somebody back there has to struggle a little bit more to engage? So again, we're layering in all these questions about both the society at the time and the current society we're in, just in the structures themselves. And if people had just walked in and sat and had tons of room and were comfortable, the communication's not the same. And we're also not asking them to work as hard. And when one has to work, one has to really give of oneself, and that can cause deeper engagement. Next, there is a moment in the piece where the lead female figure, who is the wife of this man who's doing an exorcism, and he says, "I'm going to use my wife to do this exorcism on," is carried off against her will by the cast. And she basically pauses and says to the audience, "You're complicit. You are not stopping this from happening." And again, people understand this is a theatrical construct, but I do know I even spoke to one or two people who said, "Should I have said something then? Was the piece calling on me to step in?" And again, that moment of discomfort of, even if you don't step in, even if you know it's a theatrical work, of asking, should I? What is my responsibility here? I am part of something that is carrying off a woman seemingly against her will. And they seem to be telling me I have some small say in the matter. What does that do? How does that make us question our involvement in things in our own society? All right, next, taking you down, as you can see, layers of discomfort that are built in from the first moment. Next is that we made it very clear to the audience, and we told them before they entered the second primary performance space, that if they leave, they cannot come back. So meaning, if you need to go to the restroom, anything happens, you are sacrificing your experience. You will not be able to return. And look, we know there are biological necessities. There are things that happen that cause, there are emergencies. There are things that happen that cause people to leave. However, that discomfort of, oh, I am here and I need to be here now. Even if I think something is calling me away, I need to stick with this. And if I don't stick with this, I lose. Is, I think, can be, especially in this age of media. I mean, look, we're here on screen and I'm tuning into things for 5 minutes and getting bored and saying, oh, I think I'll watch something else. And while that has one kind of value, I think there's something lost when we're not asked to stick it out. And because that's, again, kind of like life, right? Here we are in life, things get difficult, I have discomfort, but I need to find a way to work through it. It also had a nice metaphor for the piece where in the world of the play, if once you were in the ghetto at night, if you were Jewish, you could not leave. It was dangerous for you to leave. You were not allowed to leave. And if you left, you may not make it back. You could be hurt, harmed, arrested. There were a number of things that could have happened. And so we were also giving the audience a lived experience in some way of what was allowed and what wasn't, maybe at the time, in a much lighter way, obviously. Next is about, again, ironic in this moment, is about seating that was just a little tight. Everyone was kind of pressed close together and there wasn't a lot of room to breathe. And if you did want to leave, you had to kind of figure out how to get out of there and around other people. And again, this is about communal responsibility. This is about asking, I share space with others, and how do I take up space? Am I aware? Am I taking that armrest next to me? Am I spreading out too much? Am I uncomfortable with how close the person is next to me? And again, these are not uncommon moves, but in this piece, it was conscious. It wasn't just a function of, oh, you're in a theater that's a little tight. It actually was designed to put us in a very enclosed space, and therefore to also ask questions about what about those in our society who are both literally and metaphorically in enclosed spaces, and it's not easy to get out. Next is that we actually did shadow all around the audience. So as the audience went through, so the piece actually went through landscapes of Gehenna or Jewish hell in a way. It's not exactly hell, but close analogy. And so what we did was we surrounded the audience 360 in curtains. And behind the curtains, we had people doing shadow play, shadow movement for a good 50% of the piece, while heavy dialogue was going on and while music was happening. And it was very disorienting for some people. Sometimes people didn't know where to look or where to focus. And they recognized that if I look over here, I might miss something that's happening over here. I don't know exactly what's going on behind me. And again, this was by design. It is deeply uncomfortable to be disoriented in that way, especially for some duration without escape. But this is a lot like life, right? Life overwhelms us with information. and we are making choices about where we put our focus, and we're having grief about the things that we miss, and we wonder if we're missing something or if we're missing the point, so to speak. But I think, again, that discomfort has value. It slows audiences down and has them say, what is my responsibility? What story do I want to engage with? What moments are important to me and have meaning for me? And I can either fight against this, and if I fight against this, I'm going to have a miserable hour, hour and a half, 2 hours of theatrical experience. But if I surrender to it, I might actually grow or learn something or dive in. Again, I think that it's a little like life, right? Am I going to fight at every turn the experience, or am I going to kind of sink into it and recognize what I'm being asked to do, which is make difficult choices about where I want to put my focus and attention. So again, that was very purposeful. Next is, and I just alluded to this, the overwhelm of information and sound, that we had live music and dense text and shadow and choreographed movement. And this is just the way Theater Dybbuk operates. We want to encourage audience members to work. We are often asked to engage relatively passively in experiences that, the old sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, which again is really nice sometimes, and sometimes is exactly what we need, but not in every artistic experience. And I think that we are saying, how do you participate with your full self? Again, if the origins of theater are ritual that are meant for transcendence, how do we transcend? And one of the ways we transcend is actually to kind of allow everything that's coming in to fill us rather than fighting it. There's just a couple more. I'll just pause for a second. Any observations, questions arising? Great. Okay. I like that people are listening. Lovely. It's nice to be here with you. I want to say a word about duration. So a lot of times works that have no intermission, which Theater Dybbuk works generally don't, kind of top out at 80 to 90 minutes. There's a sort of relatively universally accepted wisdom that around 90 minutes is kind of where you start to go, I think people need a break. Our works tend to be more in the 90 to 110 minute range without intermission. And sometimes we do need to cut some more. That's the reality of new work, is you learn after, oh, I don't know that we needed that monologue. But some of it is also purposeful. That duration without break encourages people to, again, work through their discomfort. That, oh, I start to get bored. I start to get impatient. But I recognize I'm being called on to be here and to continue to participate and bear witness. And what is it to sit through my discomfort? It might be related to, like I said earlier, the restroom. It might be related to boredom. It might be related to, I just remembered something I need to do right after this and I'm worried about it. And I think going a little longer than the accepted wisdom about what people can handle encourages people to go deeper, right? Because I can either pay a ton of attention to what my body is concerned about or my mind is otherwise concerned about, and therefore not be in this experience and at the end go like, oh, I missed it. Or I can actually not let those physical and psychological needs have their way with me and instead be here with the piece. And in learning to do so and in working through those concerns and finding a way to focus, I might grow and actually the piece may stay with me longer. And so we purposely push against duration to challenge the audience to kind of be here now. The last part of discomfort I'll address is about leaving people without clean resolution. I think a lot of times in our kind of modern dramaturgy, we find stories that have kind of clear endings that leave us with a clear understanding of this is what I'm told to think or believe can be satisfying and can leave us feeling that the world is safe in some ways, because although we may have been on a difficult journey, the piece leaves us saying, and here's what it's about, here's the lesson to be learned, here's how it all came together or fell apart, and we understand, and we sort of feel safe on that steady ground. Instead, we actually want to leave people in a state of a kind of dis-ease, where they are needing to be asked, what is the resolution that they think needs to come, or what questions do they want to ask? So at the end of the last show, which was again largely about questions of power and assimilation and isolation versus integration, one of my favorite stories is at the end of the show, I heard two people speaking to one another, and one said, "Oh, what a despairing ending." And the other said, "Despairing? I thought it was profoundly hopeful." And they then had a dialogue about that. And it was clear that neither of them was comfortable with the ending, but they thought it meant different things because we hadn't told them what it was to mean. We left that for them. And I think a lot of good art does that. The interpretation is sort of in the eye of the person witnessing, and can therefore be a vehicle for greater understanding. Yeah.
I do have a couple questions.
Great.
One, Outer Voice is asking about how performing in unconventional spaces may feed into that discomfort, and whether is that intentional or not.
Great. So there was a question, and because I'm on this closed mic, you might not be able to hear Julie. There was a question from Outer Voice about performing in unconventional, untraditional spaces, meaning we don't generally perform in a theater, and how that might add to the discomfort and whether it's intentional or not. Thanks for the question. So yes, it may cause discomfort, because anytime you're going to a place where the rules are a little less certain, right? I know how to go to a theater, I know what's expected of me, but I'm going to a place that is not a theater. What's it going to be like? Is it going to operate like a theater? Is it not? Certainly has a discomfort in it. And I think where it is intentional is that we like people to come without expectation. They are going to come not knowing what they're going to bear witness to or participate in. And that sense of dis-ease, we don't want to soften. We actually want to say, yeah, that's the dis-ease we walk through life with. We're going to places all the time and not knowing what's going to come and how it's going to operate. And so I think there is an intention in it to put audiences not in a deeply uncomfortable place, but in a place of expectation being not the number one thing on the list, so that we can then surprise and not need to fulfill on preconceived notions. So thanks for that question.
And Stacy Mathewson asked about whether you would see Antonin Artaud as a major influence.
Oh, interesting. Thanks, Stacy. So Stacy asked about Artaud, and I think which is, you know, the Grand Guignol kind of you know, visceral theater. I do think major influence. I'm not sure. It's, you know, I never lived in that influence, but I will say I am a big believer in that kind of viscera and that experience of pushing audiences past their seeming comfort zone. To ask something of them, which I think that was where, you know, he lived. So I appreciate the question, and I think that combined with sort of Brechtian questions of alienation, of the audience feeling both connected to and alienated from, and calling out the theatricality, which puts them also in a sense of dis-ease, because am I supposed to believe this reality, or am I supposed to view it as a fake reality? So I think those combination of influences really come into play. Thank you for the question. Great. So thank you for the time. I hope this got you thinking about your own relationship to making art, and to presenting it, and to engaging with it. And I guess I would just say, you know, that maybe next time you go to the theater, it might be worth considering maybe making the first question not did I like it, but something else. You know, what am I left with? What was the intention? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And kind of going from there into the analysis of the experience. Thank you so much. In the coming weeks, we'll continue to offer these online, both chats with me and also training opportunities with our collaborating artists. Next week will be a training with one of our artists, most likely. And thanks again. I hope you have a good, safe, and healthy week, and take care. Bye-bye.